In Toronto this morning, it's gray and damp. And by tonight, the conversation shifts from the rink to the world stage, with Canada trying to keep its footing as the U.S. talks tougher about trade, war, and now cartels. Later in the brief, the key question: when Washington says military power is the answer to organized crime, what does that change, and what new lines does it blur? Toronto's starting wet. Expect rain, with temperatures around 2 degrees Celsius, topping out near 4. On the sports side, the Maple Leafs slide continues. They dropped a 6-2 decision at Madison Square Garden, a game that turned after a fast start, with New York taking control in the third. The bigger picture is where this lands in the standings. Toronto has now lost 6 straight since the Olympic break, and the margin for error is shrinking. There was also some clear trade deadline eve roster management, multiple scratches on both sides, which is a reminder that some teams aren't just playing the opponent right now, they're managing the next week. And elsewhere in the country, Winnipeg handled Tampa Bay 4-1, with a steady, structured game and strong goaltending, the kind of result that keeps their home ice narrative intact. One quick local to provincial note before we raise the stakes. Police in Northern Ontario report 3 separate incidents leading to arrests and charges, a reminder that impaired and dangerous driving continues to be a persistent day-to-day public safety issue on highways and smaller corridors alike. Turning now to the main thread, the United States is signaling a clearer shift toward military force as a central tool against organized crime in the Americas, and it's no longer just rhetoric. The U.S. military says it has begun joint operations with Ecuador targeting organized crime groups. What's notable is what we don't yet have. Neither government has disclosed where the operation is happening, how large it is, or how long it's expected to run. That lack of detail matters because it shapes the oversight questions and the risk of escalation before the public can even evaluate results. Here's the key point. This is being framed not as an extension of policing, but as a military campaign logic applied to cartel-style networks. A senior White House advisor, Stephen Miller, told a room of Latin American defense leaders that cartels can only be defeated with military power, explicitly dismissing a criminal justice approach. That's a bright line in messaging, and it's being read as an intentional policy reset under President Donald Trump toward a more militarized response. Why does this matter now? Because the tools governments choose determine what's legally permissible, what's politically sustainable, and how other countries respond. A policing framework tends to prioritize arrests, prosecution, and domestic courts. A military framework tends to prioritize targeting, territory, and disruption, and it can expand faster, but it also raises sharper questions about sovereignty, civilian harm, and accountability. The risk here is mission creep and the blurring of categories. Legal experts and Democrats have already questioned the legality of this direction, including the idea of equating drug traffickers with designated terrorist organizations. That designation question matters because it can open the door to different authorities, different tactics, and different thresholds for the use of force. Mid-episode reset. If you take one thing from this story, it's that the U.S. isn't just increasing pressure on cartels, it's changing the definition of the problem from crime to something closer to armed conflict, and that changes everything around it. Now, 2 related signals to keep in mind from Canada's vantage point. First, Canada's government is still calibrating its language around the widening Middle East conflict. Prime Minister Mark Carney offered conditional support for U.S. action aimed at preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, while also emphasizing de-escalation, and later reaffirming that international law binds all parties. That clarification came after concerns, including within liberal ranks, that the initial messaging did not foreground those legal obligations clearly enough. A caucus briefing is now set, alongside broader parliamentary briefings. Second, the economic layer. Canada's energy minister says international buyers are asking how quickly Canadian producers can expand exports if war-driven supply gaps persist. The important caveat is timing. The minister's message is that energy supply can't ramp overnight. And that brings us back to trade and alliances. There's a new Canada-EU moment on the calendar. Enhancements to CETA are set to be signed in Toronto, including work toward a digital trade addendum and updated investment dispute rules. It's technical, but it's strategic, because as the U.S. becomes more unpredictable on trade and security, Canada is visibly shoring up other channels. In that same atmosphere, President Trump has also threatened to cut off trade with Spain, a remark tied to Spain's position on how U.S. bases there could be used for strikes. Canadians online responded with a wave of solidarity. The broader takeaway isn't the social media tone, it's the pattern. Trade, basing, and security are being discussed in the same breath more often, and that can make economic relationships feel conditional. Final piece to watch as you head into the day. In Ecuador, watch for basic operational clarity, where this joint action is happening, what authorities it's operating under, and how Ecuador defines the mission on its own soil. In Washington, watch whether military power stays a talking point or turns into formal legal steps that expand who can be targeted and how. And here at home, watch how Canada balances principle, international law, de-escalation, with practical pressures like energy demand and alliance expectations. That's the brief for Friday, March 6th. Stay steady out there in the rain.